welcome. You're watching To The Point. Tonight, both our stories have a northeast flavour. As the tension and violence on the Assam-Nagaland border continues, we ask, why does this 50-year-old dispute keep recurring? And why is the Indian state unable to resolve it? That's the discussion in part 2. But first, Irom Sharmila's release has focused attention on her long-standing demand to revoke the Armed Forces Special Powers Act. It's a demand with enormous resonance both in the northeast as well as Jammu and Kashmir. So tonight we ask, what are the arguments for repealing or amending the act, and what are the grounds for saying no? That's the first debate tonight. And now joining me to discuss the Armed Forces Special Powers Act is the Political Secretary to the Chief Minister of Jammu and Kashmir, Tanveer Sadiq, the former Army Commander of Northern Command, Lieutenant General B.S. Jaiswal, the well-known human rights activist Brinda Grover, and joining us soon, the well-known senior journalist and author Sanjay Hazarika. Tanveer Sadiq, your Chief Minister has been pressing for the removal or at least the partial withdrawal of the Armed Forces Special Powers Act in Kashmir virtually from the day he took office nearly 6 years ago. What are his main arguments for wanting this?
Karan, just give me a few minutes. I just want to run you through to a few points. First of all, NC or the government is not against the army, because some of the ex-army men come on the panel and then they make it look like that National Conference is against the army. Our whole point of view is based on sound logic and ground situation. We feel that if in Kashmir, if you have 2 million tourists coming to Kashmir, those tourists would not come to Kashmir if it was not peaceful. Number two, very important, is that under an umbrella where anybody can enter your house, where he can break open your room, and in an event if somebody gets killed, there is no recourse to justice. I mean, in this day and age, why would you want a law like this? And number three, very important that I need to put, is that from 90s to what it is in 2014, there is a vast difference. If somebody doesn't find that difference, then he's pointing fingers towards the army itself.
Can I stop you? So your real argument for the repeal or the partial withdrawal of the act is that the situation has changed considerably from 1990 till today, and therefore the situation doesn't warrant the continuation of the act. Is that your real point?
Yes.
General Jaiswal, you served as Army Commander, Northern Command. Why is the Army so comprehensively opposed to the withdrawal of the Act, even the partial withdrawal of the Act?
First of all, I would like to, with due humility and respect, Mrs. Tariq, it is definitely that retired officers, we are not trying to say that the government is against the Army. Not once at all have I at least spoken. And Mr. Farooq is a good friend of mine, and we have had very good relations. So I think you rest that particular thing aside. I have reasons to say as to why it should not be revoked. Couple of quick pointers. One, why was AFSPA brought in the valley, or I would say in the J&K? It was the intention of Pakistan to prosecute proxy war. Has that intention changed? If it has not changed, then I suppose we should not repeal AFSPA. Secondly, the situation has definitely shown improvement in J&K because Army has been able to provide a conducive environment for good governance. We must facilitate the state government.
Can I interrupt at that point?
You know, the situation.
Can I interrupt at that point, General Jaiswal? If you accept that the situation has improved, then surely those are grounds itself for at least partially withdrawing the act from areas where the situation is considerably better. Why do you need to continue with the measure when the situation has improved and no longer requires it?
I'm coming to it. I'm coming to it. I didn't complete my sentence, so no wonder your question. What happened in 1999? There was the situation was seemingly very good. Kargil took place. 2008, situation was definitely looking very good. Amarnath Yatra took place. 2010, I was there. I mean, situation was again looking to be okay. Tourists were coming, everything. The stone throwing started off. Yesterday, we've caught a vehicle just before the elections wherein 7 AKs and all that, hell of a 10 kgs of RDX, etc., was captured. Now what happens is that till the time we are sure that the militants cannot operate or the area is so restricted they cannot emerge, there is no question of us recommending that.
All right, let me stop you there. I want to stop you there, General Saab, because you've given a fairly full, comprehensive answer. I want to bring in people who differ with your view. One of the points made both by General Jaiswal today and earlier by former Army Chief General Malik is that if you were to withdraw AFSPA from districts of Kashmir, like for instance Gandarbal and Srinagar, where the army is not operational, what you would do is create a magnet for militants to come there and operate freely. Therefore, to be effective, it has to operate all over the state, not partially.
Well, in Manipur, they haven't had the Armed Forces Special Power. The Disturbed Areas Act was lifted actually from the Imphal Valley some years ago, and I don't see that part of India disappearing. It's still very much part of the country. It's still very much there.
But doesn't the army argue, in fact, that because you've lifted the Disturbed Areas Act from Imphal and therefore, as a result, AFSPA can't apply, Imphal has become a magnet for militancy?
But what kind of militancy is this? I mean, you have extortion, perhaps. I mean, if you go to Nagaland, where the story all started, because 58 AFSPA was created basically to deal with the Naga uprising, in the last 6 years, not a single Indian soldier has fallen in combat. And nobody's talking about conflict there. Even in Manipur, the conflict has gone down.
Okay. Let me bring you in at that point, Brinda Grover, because the argument is not at the moment over the substance of the Act. I'll come to the substance later on. The argument is over whether it needs to apply on the whole area of a state or whether it can be partially withdrawn, particularly from areas where the army is not operational. I'm taking deliberately the example of Kashmir because it may be easier for you. The argument made by General Malik is if you withdraw it from Srinagar and Gandarbal, you will create magnets which will attract militancy. If it applies across the state as a whole, the army has greater control over militancy and over insurgency. How do you respond to that argument?
I think it's a very self-serving and diabolical argument, actually. Sanjay Hazarika has just informed you that in Imphal, for almost a decade, in 7 assembly constituencies of Imphal, AFSPA is not applicable. We have not seen the surge of the magnetic surge that is being told to us. General Jaiswal used the alibi of Pakistan to justify AFSPA in J&K. I wonder what alibi...
I think we may have lost
We have to devise a different...
Carry on.
Can you hear me?
You're back with me. Carry on. Carry on.
Yeah, what I'm saying is, yes, these are border states. In order to deal with hostile neighbors, we will have to evolve different means rather than repressive laws. I think the army cannot be allowed to completely create an undemocratic system simply because these are border states. General Jaiswal, is not an argument that is palatable in a democracy.
General Jaiswal, let me bring you in and remind you that we're still not talking about the substance of the Act. I'll come to that in a moment's time. We're talking about...
I would like to answer...
I'm asking your question, then answer it, sir. Wait for my question. The question I want to put to you is this. Why can you not agree to a partial withdrawal of AFSPA, particularly from places like Srinagar and Gandarbal where the army is not operational? Because the argument made by General Malik that this will create a magnet that will attract insurgents and militancy clearly doesn't work with people like Brinda Grover or Tanveer Sadiq or Sanjay Hazarika. And Sanjay Hazarika has pointed out how in Imphal, you don't have AFSPA because you don't have the Disturbed Areas Act and it hasn't become a magnet.
Let me first talk about Kashmir. Kashmir's situation is like a balloon. You squeeze in here, it burgeons over here. Now, you don't understand. I'm sorry to say that civilians are trying to teach army how to operate. Sorry. Now, what happens is, you have seen earlier times like in Punjab, there were special SROs which were issued for people crossing over to Haryana and to Himachal. Now, if in case there is a hot pursuit, you mean to say we let off, suppose we take off in Srinagar, and they go into some other district, the Baramulla district, you mean to say we will have to get an SRO and then operate over there? Our convoys are going through all the places. Now, when they get targeted, they're going to hold for the SRO to retaliate?
In other words, what you're saying is it has to apply across the state. It can't be partially withdrawn from any one part. Is that right?
No.
About AFSPA
no, I'm coming with the model, if in case.
Conduct operations.
You see,
it does not say how to conduct operations. It gives arbitrary powers. They are using AFSPA simply as a cover. It is not, AFSPA doesn't lay down how you are going to conduct your operations. I'm not asking as a citizen. So we are not to be marginalized.
Give him a chance to finish before you interrupt. Let's not interrupt each other. General Jaiswal, you need to come to the point quickly because I can't allow time for long, expansive answers. What's being said is that the army is using AFSPA to give itself unnecessary cover which it doesn't need.
When I'm talking, I will not. Please continue.
General Jaiswal, what is being made is the same.
I'll tell you.
General Saab, please listen to my question, sir. General Saab, listen to my question, then answer it. The point being made by Brinda Grover is that the army is asking for more cover than it needs. You do not need AFSPA across the state as a whole. You can withdraw it from areas like Srinagar and Ganderbal. It's a certain mental laziness that stops the army from accepting this demand.
Karan, you remove AFSPA, then you better remove the army from these areas, let them go back to the barrack, and you will feel the heat. I cannot afford to get my soldiers killed, their morale coming down, because there will be inhibitions.
Okay.
No, please.
Tanveer Sadiq, come in. You wanted to interrupt, go ahead, very quickly.
And let me also counter Brinda.
The problem here is...
Go ahead.
General, if you could hear me for a minute. We are asking, see, in place like Srinagar or Ganderbal, the army does not operate. Whichever operation has happened by the local and the paramilitary force. Now, name one good incident that has, and so far the AFSPA is concerned, has had the army. While as I will name a couple of issues like Pathribal and Machal. They may be names for the general, but they resonate in Kashmir. These are the issues where the misuse of AFSPA has happened.
Okay.
So you need to understand in totality. We are not saying revoke AFSPA from places which are nearer to the border. We are saying places which the army does not need to operate where.
All right, let's move on. We've discussed this issue of whether AFSPA needs to apply across the state as a whole. That is fervently the point of General Jaiswal and fervently the point made by former Army Chief General Malik. Clearly, people like Tanveer Sadiq, Sanjay Hazarika and Brinda Grover believe that, in fact, you can partially remove it without doing any damage to the army's strategy as a whole. Let's move on beyond that, Sanjay Hazarika, to the actual substance of the Act, because that's another issue, and many believe it's a more critical issue. To begin with, there's Clause 4, which gives every army soldier, from a non-commissioned officer upwards, the right to enter and search without warrant, to arrest without warrant, and finally to shoot to kill if he is of the opinion that it is necessary. Do you believe such sweeping powers are necessary, or do you believe they are exaggerated?
I don't think in a democracy you can live by imposing inequality on different parts of the country for 50 years. I think you cannot have a situation where you make inequality in law. You're creating a situation where powers reside in one group. They have the powers, they have the weapons, and the people are vulnerable.
Can I put this to you? There are many places and many occasions, and this happens nationwide, by the way, not just in Kashmir, not just in Manipur, when the police have the right to shoot and kill. That is often given by district magistrate level officers. If it's acceptable for the police to have those powers, why is Clause 4 not acceptable to you in a disturbed area in the hands of the army?
Well, on what basis do you declare an area disturbed and continue to keep it disturbed for 50 years or around that time? I mean, it is unacceptable to believe, because people, this is partly coming back to an early issue that you used and which I think the general was responding to. I think a very important point is that people want to move on. People want
that I
have
understand, but
different
people may want to move on.
aspirations.
But let's talk for a moment about the substance of the Act, which is irrelevant to what people may want. Governments impose things that often people may not want because the government has to decide. What I'm saying is, you're objecting to Clause 4 because it has the right to shoot to kill, but district magistrates can give the right to shoot to kill to the local police, and the local police is not as responsible.
That is only for a specific period. You know, you have Section 144, you have the police call out, and then you may even have the
so
army
it's the
call
long
out.
duration here that makes a difference.
It is the hammering of people, the pushing, the destruction of their rights, which I think is really at stake.
Before I go to General Jaiswal, I want to first go to Brinda Grover and point out something else to you. Many people say, Brinda Grover, that what makes Clause 4 truly unacceptable is the protection Clause 4 gets from Clause 6. Although I'll add that Clause 6 is actually Clause 7 in the Kashmir version of AFSPA. And this clause says that no person acting under this Act can be prosecuted without the sanction of the central government. Do you believe that the combination of Clause 4 and the protection of Clause 6 means that it becomes a pretty fearsome article altogether?
Absolutely. What 4 and 6 do together is to guarantee absolute impunity for every and any human right violation. And this is not, I'm not speaking in the abstract. This has been established through the cases of Manipur pending in the Supreme Court of India as well as in Kashmir. And in fact, in a report of March 2013, in a commission appointed by the Supreme Court, Justice Hegde says that the cases that have come before us are the egregious examples of abuse of AFSPA. This is a former Supreme Court judge speaking. What Section 6 and Section 7 counterpart in JNK says is you will require, you are actually interfering in the administration of justice.
Okay.
Before General Jaiswal comes in and says, I can present evidence got through RTI application from the Ministry of Defense for JNK, which shows that from 1989 to 2011, in JNK, AFSPA came into being in 1990.
Okay.
Not a single request for sanction for prosecution of any army officer has ever been granted.
Okay.
That is why this human right abuse is rampant. And just one more comment.
Very quickly.
General Jaiswal said that he does not want his soldiers to be killed or their morale to be let down. As a civilian, I say the Indian Army exists for the citizens of this country. And if they are being killed by abuse of law, those soldiers must be prosecuted.
Let's not become rhetorical, and let's not become rhetorical at the cost of our soldiers. That's not really acceptable. But there is a fundamental point you make, which I will put to General. This is not a dispute between you and me, Ms. Grover. General Jaiswal, let me put this question to you. General Jaiswal, I want you to answer my question. General Jaiswal, pause a moment, sir. There's a time delay between us, which is why it always sounds as if I'm interrupting you. I'm not really. It's the time delay.
Yes.
The question I want to put to you is this. The combination of Clause 4, which under AFSPA gives even a non-commissioned officer, a Havaldar, the right to shoot to kill, with Clause 6, which says that anything done under this Act can't be prosecuted for unless the central government gives permission. The combination of the two, your critics say, gives the army virtually permission for murder with immunity. And that is what worries people. And as you heard Tanveer Sadiq say a moment ago, the fake encounters in Patribal and Machil created just this concern. The rape and killing of Thangjam Manorma in Manipur created just this concern. Does it not worry you that your own citizenry believes that this is an unnecessary step?
First of all the proponents for the removal of AFSPA, I would recommend, if you want to feel the heat, be there yourself. 2, talking about the constitutional, what they call endorsements on this, the Nagaland People's Movement of Human Rights versus Union of India, 1997, the Constitution bench studied the whole thing, and it said so that it does not violate the Constitution provisions 14, 19 and 21. Justice Reddy, Jeevan Reddy, in 2004, he said that AFSPA provisions should be included in the UAPA 1967. That is what the judges feel. Now, as far as 4 and Section 7, not 6.
6
why
in
does the
Manipur,
army
7
come
in Kashmir.
Because the police is not being able to control. Therefore, army, when they come in, no, please, I'm talking about J&K as of now. Therefore, when army steps in, it should have more powers than the police. And to make sure that their hands are strengthened to act in a special circumstances, special provisions are given. To say that none of the sanctions have been asked, I think there were 60, I'm slightly out of record now, 60 odd cases were asked. And let me tell you, the army, we finish off cases, 50% of them in 3 months, 20% within 6 months, and the rest 30% in 9 months.
General Jaiswal, let me put this to you. Your critics say that the army's response to fake encounters such as Patribad and Machil, the army's response to the rape and killing of Thangja Manorma proves that in fact a lot of criminality, and I'm using that word deliberately, a lot of criminality is being given cover under Clause 6 of AFSPA. Therefore, remove Clause 6 because Clause 6 is providing impunity to
Clause 7. Clause 7.
But 7 in Srinagar, 6 in Manipur. That's why I'm using 6. 6 is the older version. Whether you call it 6 or 7, it's a matter of detail. The argument is that this clause is providing cover for criminal activity, for rape, for false encounters. Remove it because it is encouraging a form of criminality that at the end of the day gives the army a bad name. That's what your critics say.
Let me tell you, there have been 1,520 odd cases which are of HR violation. Only 2.32% or so, I may be wrong by a couple of point percentages, they have been proved correct, and out of which 41 officers, 9 JCOs and about 74 ORs, they have been punished ranging from 12 years to life imprisonment and dismissal. We are definitely, you take it from me, I am on oath to say that we do not protect, and in our case, more of the officers have been punished for command failure under whom the act has taken place.
All right. I want to go.
I'm telling you on oath, I would never protect a person who's violated this.
All right.
There are cases, Machal and Patribal, the moment it started off, Machal case, there's so many people being convicted. Where's the doubt?
All right.
And they will be convicted, but a proper procedure was warranted before we proceeded against this.
Let me stop you there, General Saab. I want to bring in both Brinda Grover and Tanveer Sadek. Brinda Grover, first of all, specifically to that point you've heard from General Jaiswal, that there's a very, very small minuscule of cases where you could argue that cover for criminality has been given to army officers or army jawans who've done the wrong thing because of Clause 6. That for most of the other times, for the vast majority, Clause 6 actually provides them with the cover they need to do their insurgency. As General Raghavan has argued, a former Director General of Military Operations, without that cover, the army couldn't do its anti-insurgency function. Respond to that specifically.
Counterinsurgency operations can be conducted. What Section 6 or Section 7 does is that will you be prosecuted for a crime that you have been arraigned for. We are only saying that either make that a time-bound sanction or remove it. In fact, the Justice Hegde Commission has recommended that in cases of encounter, there should be a time-bound 3-month period within which the issue of sanction should be decided. Secondly, General Jaiswal is insisting that they will try the men under court-martial proceedings. Court-martial does not qualify for a fair trial for the victim because it is really the judge, jury, prosecutor from the rank and the command of the accused. Therefore, we are saying come under civilian law. Justice Verma made these recommendations in the 2013 report, including saying that AFSPA is legitimizing sexual violence by men in uniform. These are the words of the committee report of 2013. The NHRC has said in Geneva that AFSPA confers impunity. We need to hear these voices of former Chief Justices of the Supreme Court of India.
Let me put this to you, Sanjay Hazarika. I'm going to quote from General Raghavan, a former Director General of Military Operations, writing in the Indian Express, September 2010. He says, if AFSPA's enabling powers are to be revoked, diluted or made subject to normal processes of law, the military will conduct operations not on the basis of military judgment, but on the need to defend its actions in court. And what he's saying is that if that happens, the army's ability to contain insurgency will diminish hugely, and the cost will be probably the secession of Kashmir. How do you respond to that? Because if the army says that, can any civilian government turn around to army officers and say, we don't believe you?
Well, I think I respect General Raghavan hugely. He was a colleague on the
Jeevan Reddy
Committee
Absolutely.
with some of us. And we all signed off on a report which General Jaiswal has quoted in part. But the operative part is that AFSPA has become an object of hate. And we believe unanimously that it should be repealed.
But what about this argument?
And as far as this is concerned, in places like Kashmir, if you go back to what your point earlier, if you withdraw areas, you have to, basically it's a point of, you have to create confidence among people as much as anything else.
Okay.
And that is very, very critical in a time when, I know you don't want to get into this, but actually people want to move away from this.
And you're saying that you will only create that confidence if you trust the people to remove AFSPA.
Well,
even if you only do it on a trial basis.
Institutes four things: inequality, injustice, impunity, and immunity.
Okay.
And you want to deal with that, you got to deal
Tanveer
with
Sadiq, the bottom line is very simply this. Even if, and I'm simply saying this for argument's sake, even if in fact there are good arguments for either repealing AFSPA or diluting it or simply making it partial and not right across the state, those are arguments that you haven't been able to convince the army about. Your chief ministers tried. At different points in time, it seemed as if Mr. Chidambaram, when he was home minister, agreed with Omar Abdullah, but you didn't succeed. Is it that politicians don't have the gumption and strength to stand up against resistance from the army? Or is it that you can't make a good case that convinces the army? Very quickly, which is it? Because at the end of the day, politicians rule the country,
Karan,
not the army.
Karan, unfortunately, that's the problem. You know, whenever we raise this issue of AFSPA, it's always taken as we are against the army. But you know, the most important thing in Kashmir is that the alienation that exists in the valley is because of the continuation of the AFSPA. And my very important point is, even if you, for an argument's sake, even if the army, the general is saying, if we revoke or amend the AFSPA in Srinagar or Badgam, we can always, if the situation goes bad, we can always reimpose it. What's the problem in that?
But you haven't answered my specific question. My specific question was this. But my specific question was this. Given that it's civilians who run the country, not the army, how is it that you fail to persuade the army? Do you lack good arguments? Or are you unable to stand up to them?
No, the problem is that we are taken, you know, anybody who supports the AFSPA is taken as we are supporting the insurgents.
Okay.
That's the problem, you know, everywhere we do it, you blame us that we are supporting the insurgents there.
All right.
While as we only say that whatever peace obtains in the valley, it should percolate to the people as well.
General Jaiswal, I want to give you the last word because in a very real sense, you were one on your own with three people with a view that's the opposite of yours. And the question I want to put to you is this. Is clearly extremely unpopular with the population of Jammu and Kashmir. It's extremely unpopular with the population of Manipur. It is creating amongst the civilian population a degree of alienation that is threatening our democracy, possibly, at times even our unity. How does the army respond to that deep concern? Because that vitiates the very strength, if not the idea of India.
Let me tell you, most of the protagonists of this AFSPA being removed, they are some of the terrorists themselves because they want space for maneuver. Two, I have personal knowledge of interacting with civilians in the suburbs, in certain areas. They swear by the army. Our Sadbhavna has done extremely well. What Mr. Sadiq is saying, if you don't want the army to operate in Srinagar, Ganderbal, etc., whichever area, You make them police districts, but do not remove AFSPA. Army will be most happy to come back to its barracks, maintaining its COBs, etc., the land, etc., the way you can't get it back. And let me tell you, once it is repealed, to say that it can come back, sorry. It's an act of the parliament, and you know what happens in the parliament. It can never come back.
All right,
Manipur model has failed.
We've run out of time. No,
any army man.
We've run out of time. I'm afraid I'm going to have to end this particular part of tonight's program there. This is an issue on which there are deeply divided opinions, and those opinions are held with deep sincerity on both sides. It's a very difficult issue to resolve, and clearly it is a problem that the government is going to have to address, because Irom Sharmila's release brings this right back into focus. And we need to ask ourselves a fundamental question. If the army feels it needs it to fight insurgency, do we agree? And do you agree at the cost of democracy and human rights? It's not an easy issue for any government to sort out, but it is an issue governments have to sort out quickly, because otherwise government is failing in its fundamental duty.